Welcome to At the Fence Line with your hosts, Sarah Chambers and Gavin Benker.
What do you want?
Ring,
Hey,
ring.
Gavin.
Hey, Sarah.
How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing excellent today.
Oh, sounds like you might have had a couple of Starbucks.
It's actually home coffee today, but I am on espresso shot 4 of my regular limit of 6. So it's a
Okay.
good caffeination level for this time of
You're
the day.
you're off to a good start. Yeah, well,
I am.
adequately caffeinated over here, but not at your level.
Most people are not, but it's not easy to keep up with my pace, really.
Yeah. I don't think I can handle that.
Yeah. You are calling me. What can I help you
Ah,
with today, Gavin?
I wanted to call and pick your brain about communication. And I was also thinking that our listeners might want to hear about that topic.
Right. Yes. Good call. We do have listeners that are here listening in, and it feels like we're off to a shining example of effective communication so far.
Yeah. What not to do. Don't just bring up agenda topics out of the blue.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Maybe we can use that as an example later in our discussion.
Sure. Yeah. That makes good sense. Should we segue in?
Let's get to it.
Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Just a heads up, the thoughts and opinions shared here are our own and do not necessarily reflect those of Backswath or our colleagues. This is a space for open conversation, and the content is intended for general information and discussion only, not personalized advice or official guidance.
Okay. Hi. Well, yeah, just building off that intro, I wanted to ask you about kind of what kind of communications work you're doing right now, if there are any clients that you have at the moment where maybe you've been able to help or make a difference, or if there's any challenges, successes. Yeah, with that, yeah, let me know if there's anything that's applicable in that way.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting because in the work that I do in HR consulting, I find that communication is really the baseline for all of it. So whether it's
Hmm.
your efficacy in communicating with your employees, the tools that you're using to communicate, whatever it might be, um, that it's really a foundational piece of HR. And as much as it weaves through employees, it's obviously woven through farm families as well, through family members. So it's a big part of what I do. I'm working with a farm right now. They are fantastic people, really successful farm,
Hmm.
multi-generational, multi-family, and communication really, again, it's a huge part of the work that I'm doing with them. So roles and responsibilities on their farm, not always clear. Sometimes there's the confusion, um, and really a lot of things being left unsaid. um, People don't want to ruffle each other's feathers, don't always want to cause conflict or start conflict, which is, I think so many families can relate to that. Um, Conflict can be productive sometimes. Not all conflict is bad, but that's where, again, it ties back to communication because good conflict will be structured with good communication.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so some really just interesting work happening right now with that family.
Yeah, well, I can relate. So, without
Mm,
being specializing in HR like you, I work with a lot of families where they don't want to rock the boat per se. They want to keep everything happy all the time, but sometimes that leads to things just bubbling under the surface and then it becomes a bigger issue
for
later.
sure.
So it sounds like this farm, they're great people, like you said, they're
Yeah.
successful, and they're just looking
Yeah.
to improve their communication to maybe formalize it a little bit more. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that improvement is the goal, right? You're not going to go from poor or average or kind of, normal family communication to structured and, really, really excellent communication, business communication overnight. You can get there
Right.
overnight, but it's not going to happen overnight. I think we can go over some tips for our listeners that they can implement regularly and they'll see some change.
Absolutely. Yes. So today we'll talk about incremental improvements towards, just communication challenges that you might be having on the farm. So we'll talk about how to get the conversation going, how to have productive meetings, the annual meeting cadence, big thing that not a lot of people think about, and then just some nuance within communication within the meeting itself that I think really has the ability to make or break the success of the meeting. And
Okay,
then we'll tie that
sounds
all
good.
back to
Yeah,
the farm that I'm working with.
yeah, perfect. Um, so I just wanted to make a comment that I think what we're going to go over today, it should be said that these are widely applicable tips and best practices for any kind of farm in any sort of business stage of their business life cycle, whether they're going through transition or it might be approaching or not. This is kind of, yeah, communication 101 and yeah, how to get the conversation going. The first step, I think, is to consider whether you're using an advisor or not, but
Mhm.
acknowledging that you're trying to improve. You're already at the table. Like I'm using a communication example of being at the table, but you're all like that. It's great. You're listening to a podcast. You are interested in improving your communication. That's great. Pat yourself on the back. And yeah, another thing that I would say is to have a dedicated space and time. Um,
Yeah,
does that make sense?
absolutely. It does. And that, like that dedicated space and time definitely needs to be free of distractions. So there's a lot of things that, when you're setting the location for your meeting that you might not even consider as distractions because they're just part of your daily life. But, things like ringing phones, people knocking on the office door, um, just whatever it might even be, like screens in the background that might be, I don't know, running a screensaver or something like that. You never know what might be distracting to other people. And so you
Hmm.
really want to eliminate that before the meeting as much as you can.
And that makes sense.
Mhm.
Do you have any compact or comment on family dynamics? Whether you're having a family meeting or a business meeting, because like, we know the majority of Canadian farms are still family owned and operated.
Mhm.
But you know, you're the manager, you're the owner, your family, you try to have non-family meetings at business meetings.
Mhm.
The proverbial what hat are you wearing? How does that play into this?
Yeah, I think it's so important to always be keeping in mind, like you say, what hat you're wearing. It's something I talk to people about all the time. Um, you might be a leader in your business, but if you want roles and responsibilities to be effective and to be respected, then you need to remember what hat you're wearing in what situation. So like I say, you might be a leader in your business, but if you are operating a piece of equipment and
Hmm.
your farm has, an equipment supervisor in place or a field operations supervisor, whatever it might be, even if you own the farm, when you're operating equipment,
Hmm.
you answer to that person.
Hmm.
And it's really, really important to just always kind of be thinking about that and practice sort of being fluid within your business. So that, like I say, you're really respecting other people's roles, respecting the framework and the foundational kind of processes and systems that you've put in place.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. It almost feels like there's a self like a positive cycle you can get into where communication itself could be a topic that you would have in a early meeting or an actual business meeting. So, you're going to get this ball rolling and you're going to see improvements in other areas. So with that, maybe we could talk about how to have some of those productive meetings, those first meetings to get that ball rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that every farm should include communication as an agenda item. I
Yeah.
mean, we're going to talk more about how to structure your meeting, but like just what you mentioned is having like talking about communication, communicating about communication is
Yeah, it's
so
like a loop. Yeah.
important. Yes, yeah, but so that's like, kind of an aside, but when it comes to having a productive meeting itself, so, whatever the meeting topic might be, your farm has decided, your family, the the key sort of stakeholders in your business, or, everybody knows you need to get together. Planning the meeting and the logistics around the meeting is really important. Who is coming to the meeting? Not everybody needs to be at every single meeting. So
Right.
if you have roles and responsibilities defined already, be really strategic about who needs to be invited. Um, and don't be afraid to not invite people if the topic of conversation isn't necessarily relevant to them. In the same breath, though, just like you might not invite someone, you might be really strategic about inviting people that aren't right away super obvious to be on
Hmm.
the guest list for your meeting. If there's somebody that you're trying to train, you want to sort of give them a look behind the curtain of a leadership discussion, knowing that maybe the agenda items aren't too heavy. That's a
Hmm.
really great opportunity to be kind of bringing new people in those situations. So really spend some time thinking about who's coming to the meeting, and then what are you talking about? What's the purpose of the meeting? And really be mindful of the weight of a topic and how that can play on people's sort of energy levels throughout the meeting. So, you even if your farm sits down once a week to have meetings regularly, and maybe you've got a standing agenda, be respectful of that and be a bit strategic. Like, don't add a really intense subject to a meeting that already tends to be quite full. Obviously, you're thinking about where the meeting is being held. Most meetings are probably going to take place somewhere on the farm. But if you are having major strategic planning sessions with the leaders in your organization, you might actually choose to have those meetings offsite. You might, rent a room at a library in town, or, it could be even a more formal space like at a hotel or something like that. But really think about these kind of things. Think about, where do we want to have the meeting? What are the benefits of having it on farm where it might be
Hmm.
really convenient
Hmm.
versus at the kitchen table versus, kind of leaving and going to an off farm space. And then lastly, so logistically, we've got the who, the what, the where. Of course, we're going to talk about when. Timing is really important. Is everybody available? How tired are we going to be when we're having this conversation?
Hmm.
How distracted are people going to be at that time of the day? Um, just kind of thinking about those really key baseline things
Hmm.
before you go into the next stage of planning. Once you have all of that kind of nailed down, you would be putting that into an agenda. I absolutely recommend creating an agenda in advance, sending it to everyone so that if they want something to be added, if they maybe don't feel like they need to be there, all of those things can be determined in advance. But definitely create an agenda, send it out to everybody, so that people can start mentally preparing for the meeting that they're going to be coming to. Agendas are really, really important.
Yeah. I have the same comment, or I agree 100%. I'm not sure how to say it, but I couldn't agree more. Is
Yeah.
maybe the phrase I was looking for. Having that agenda and sticking to the agenda. You've already made a couple of giant first steps in having some formalization to your communication. So don't, yeah, please try not to waste it by veering off the agenda. And nobody's perfect. It might happen, but do your best to stick to the
Mhm.
agenda. And it'll get that ball rolling. And
And
then,
that's
yeah.
times, sorry to interject, but that's times where, depending on the topic, it
Hmm.
might be helpful to have a facilitator come in,
Hmm.
to help you sort of, stay focused and really accomplish the goals that you're setting out for that session.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And
Mhm.
then speaking of agendas, one way to help make the next meeting's agenda is to take notes during your current meeting, which then can become and inform the topics of the next agenda. So recording some notes, having a dedicated note taker. Everyone can take notes, that's fine, but having a bit of an official transcript, so to speak, and recording action items. Who said that they're going to do something, and what is that item, when they want to get it finished. Those then can be reviewed at the next meeting and form the basis of that next agenda.
Absolutely. And I would say, where possible. You should be trying to book the next
Uh-huh.
meeting
Yeah.
before you adjourn the one you're in right now. It's so difficult to, herd kittens, so to speak. Everybody's busy, everyone's running around. So if you can, it's just always better to book the next meeting before you leave the one that you're in. And like you said, tying back to the notes and, sort of having a keynote taker and things like that. If there's action items that you're coming up with in that meeting, make sure that you also assign accountability and everybody agrees to it before you leave that meeting. So,
Mhm.
any of the to-dos, everybody should be really clear on what's going to be expected of them um, before they come into that next meeting. And before you know it, when you've sort of got um, notes and action items and follow up things to do, you really start to develop kind of a plan for meetings and a plan around topics
Mhm.
that your farm can adopt.
Yeah. Well, having that plan is something that I wanted to speak to a little bit as well. We talked about earlier about, yeah, I don't know, just about 5, 10 minutes ago. I think you made the comment about starting to have a bit of a cadence or like what meetings happen during what time of year. Because we're just talking about meetings in general here, but there's all different kinds of meetings. There's weekly, more operational ones. You made the comment about maybe a bigger picture annual strategic planning type meeting. So there's obviously just acknowledging here that there are different kinds of meetings that will be held at different frequencies and at different times of the year. So on those bigger meetings, talking about longer term goals, vision setting, where the farm might be at in transition planning, or if they need to get started, bigger picture purchases like land or equipment or expanding your herd, things like that, bigger picture capital items, financial reviews. Those are meetings that you're not going to have every week. Those are going to happen at different times of the year, maybe on an annual or biannual basis. And so, depending on your farm's kind of operational cycle, whether you're a grain farm or a livestock or mixed, you'll have different busy seasons. And yeah, you don't want to have a strategic planning meeting during seeding or during calving season. It just doesn't make sense. So it's a good idea to have a general outline of your annual meeting cycle or cadence, whatever word you want to use, where
Mhm.
you've got the weekly, the monthly, maybe you've got a harvest review meeting, you've got some safety meetings in there, and then some bigger picture kind of annual planning meetings. However you want to design that, like there, sure, an advisor could make some suggestions. It will evolve over time. You can find out what works and what doesn't work on your farm and make adjustments. But if you have that mapped out a little bit, that makes the whole system work well. It helps inform agendas. It helps if an agenda item is brought up in a meeting. No, we'll talk about that after harvest or after our our year-end financial statements come in. If it's something about a purchase or a financial performance issue, something like that. So, um, yeah, the annual meeting cadence, something that I would suggest would help a farm that's looking to improve in their communication efficacy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really important. And I think easy um, to put some structure in place even just around that. Like, definitely recommend recording it somewhere. You can have just like a simple Excel document that,
Hmm.
you keep track of what months of the year, what meetings are taking place in what months of the year, how often, topics need to be recurring, things like that.
Hmm.
And even just creating that document could be part of your annual planning cycle where everybody sits down and says, like
Yeah,
you say, okay, how often do we need to do a financial review?
yeah,
And kind of planning for it then. So would definitely recommend recording that,
yeah.
adding
So
structure.
that's another one of those communicating about communications.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Well, once you get
really a
started,
lot
you'll
of
do less of that and you'll do more of the actual
yes.
communications. But there are some kind of foundational things to kind of get going. Yeah. So
Yes.
we've talked
Yeah.
about starting off, we've talked about some structure around agendas and annual meeting cadence and stuff. What about some other tips while you're in the meeting? Do you have anything that you'd want to share with our listeners on that?
Yeah, definitely. And the sort of nuance of facilitation itself, and the words we use, the intent behind them, how we use our words within a meeting, it's really important and really impactful. And so, Gavin, you and I as consultants, these are things that we would stick to, that like tools that we would use when we're meeting with a family. But whether a family chooses to go with an advisor or not, you can still understand some of the principles, the nuance of facilitation yourselves. If you aren't looking to, work with an advisor, it's still important to understand these things, because I think it's so easy for us to misunderstand each other. We all have
Mhm.
good intentions, but you come and you say the wrong thing, um, and the impacts of that, especially on a family business, can be
Mhm.
huge. So when it comes to effective communication within a meeting, or just, any time in our lives in general, the first thing that I always say is that effective communication is consistent communication. So it doesn't work if you bring up certain issues, but like all the time and not other ones, or,
Mhm.
even just the meetings itself. If you're not sitting down to meet consistently, then when you do, that can have a different impression than, if you're not meeting as frequently as you should, or not communicating as
Yeah, no,
frequently
I
as you
get it.
should.
It's
So,
one of those things where, oh, we're having a meeting. Oh, who's got something to say kind of thing.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly. So
yeah.
it's important to be consistent so that people know what to expect. And so that, sort of your tone, the way that you're
Yep.
relaying information is like people understand it, they know what's coming. So consistency is really important. Another big one that I always say is to approach situations with a curious mindset. So especially if you are part of a leadership group or a family that has maybe struggled with communication in the past, it can be really easy to hear something and just automatically assume that you understand what that person's trying to say, and I find that often happens in the negative. So we hear something and we just, we think, oh my goodness, I can't believe they said that, blah, 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 blah. So the second thing I like to say is approach situations with a curious mindset. If you feel yourself assuming something, especially if it's for the negative, ask a question. Hey, this is what I'm hearing. Is that right? What did you mean by that? Because this
Mhm.
is kind of what I heard you say, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding you before we move forward. Um, it might feel a bit unnatural at first, but imagine all of the turmoil you could save yourself if you ask a question, approach with a curious mindset, and, are able to avoid some really like negative conflict because of it. So,
Mhm.
so definitely asking questions, approach with curious mindset, don't make assumptions. The other thing that I say is don't try to be right, try to be productive. So if you are finding yourself maybe disagreeing with a comment that someone has said, before you voice that, stop and take a second. What is the purpose of me, or what is my reasoning behind wanting to voice my disagreement with this person? Hard to say, but is it my ego? Do I
Mhm.
just like being right? Um, and whether or not that's true, will it be productive either way? So does it really matter? Before I speak up, does it make a difference to more than my ego?
Mhm.
I find that often, even myself, if I disagree with someone, I will really want to voice it. But then I realize like that's not going to change the outcome at the end of the day. Or if it does change it, it'll be so minute that sometimes it's just better to leave things alone. So, if you find yourself disagreeing with someone, just make sure that your focus is always on being productive and having a productive outcome rather than just you and your need to be right.
Yeah. I
Um,
see that. I see that with farm families that are going through transition, which are typically the farms that I work with, um, quite consistently, where,
mm,
yeah, somebody actually might be right, but there's a better and more productive way to handle that disagreement. And it goes both ways, from older generation to younger and younger to older. You might have a new way of doing something, but is it the time or place to make that stand? Or the
Yeah.
older generation's got all the experience, but it might be productive to let the younger generation, learn as they go and make the odd mistake, as long as it's not like something
Yes.
really big. So yeah, I hear you. I hear you on that one.
I think, and what you just said is really important about letting people make mistakes, because that really speaks right to the heart of most of those situations where, trying to be right versus productive is there are absolutely opportunities when you're training up new people, whether it be next gen or arm's length,
Yeah.
that, there's wiggle room where people can actually make mistakes and have it not make a huge impact on your business. So, and who knows, you might even learn something new, if you think you kind of have it all, but maybe somebody comes in with a new idea. So, yeah, so I think that was really a great and insightful comment. Um, the next one that I have is say what you mean and mean what you say. Um, for a variety of reasons, people can interpret sarcasm, joking, whatever it might be. People interpret those things differently. And some of it is actually, related to neurodivergence, which is something that I think is important for people to just be mindful of. But then other times it could just be we don't share the same sense of humor. So what I think is a joke or what I assume people are taking as sarcasm, they might not actually be. So it's important to always say what you mean and mean what you say so that there is not confusion. And of course, I'm not suggesting that we go into every single meeting super stuffy and
Right.
super formal. It's not always appropriate, but there are certain times, especially during a disagreement, where you should just say the thing, be direct
Hmm.
and make sure that you really mean what you are saying, so that there can be no confusion, no gray area. And then with that, I always say as well is to really talk about emotions that do or don't exist, just for further clarity. So if you're maybe getting really like kind of heated about something, it's okay to say, you guys, I think I'm just getting a bit worked up here. I'm getting a bit frustrated because I really feel passionately about this topic. So I want to keep going, but like if I'm coming across that way, that's just kind of how I'm feeling right now. Or, even in another situation, you might be saying, I know it seems like I'm getting really frustrated right now. I'm actually not. I'm just really excited to talk about this. So
Hmm.
absolutely label feelings that are happening so that again, there's no guessing games going on. People know exactly the way that you're feeling and aren't going to interpret it or misinterpret it, I should say, any other way. Um, and then again, when it comes to just clarity and not no guessing games, um, is to really like practice it, repeating back what you've heard. So I kind of addressed that earlier when I was talking about approaching things with a curious mindset. But again,
Yeah.
this is what I heard you say. I just want to make sure that that's right.
Hmm.
And let that person hear the way that you are receiving the information that they're trying to give, so that you give them a chance to clarify if maybe they don't follow the same excellent communication principles that you do. Then,
Right.
they have
Yeah.
a chance to kind of have a do-over.
Yeah. Okay. Can I go back one point? I had a bit of a
Yeah.
comment kind of add on to that one when you were talking about verbalizing or acknowledging emotions that might be present in the meeting.
Yes.
Like I've definitely had a few families where there was conflict and some heated words, but more often than
Mm,
not, I experience someone being more quiet or distant in a meeting, like not
yes.
being fully present. And I think that has either underlying distractions or perhaps underlying emotions that aren't getting kind of acknowledged. And then it doesn't get heated. It just goes kind of quiet and unproductive.
Yeah,
Is that,
absolutely.
do you follow the same kind of rule? Would encourage that person to say, I'm sorry if I'm not participating a lot today. I've got a lot on my mind back at my house with my family or in my personal life. Or
Y
is that,
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think that would
Yeah,
be helpful, right?
absolutely, because
Yeah.
yeah, and depending on what their answer might be, you might decide to stop the meeting. Like, you might
Mm,
say, "Hey, you know what? That's totally understandable. You're in your personal life, you're going through a big thing right now. Let's postpone this for another day when we've all kind of got a more clear headspace."
mhm.
The other outcome of doing that, I mean, if you are leading the meeting, even if you're not, if you notice someone in the room that's starting to withdraw, to say to that person, it feels like you're kind of withdrawing right now. Are we talking about something that makes you uncomfortable?
Hmm.
Or, is there something that you're not saying that maybe it would help to get off your chest? That can really help to re-engage that person, and maybe bring out something that, again, you hadn't thought of, you didn't know was going on. So definitely like addressing those emotions that, you might be perceiving around the room, I think is really important.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for acknowledging that. Um, so just kind of to wrap up that section here about your tips for effective communication within the meeting, like the nuance, the more softer, subtle parts of it, um,
Yes.
can be applied in everyday life. But what I like about it is I think that ties into and helps with that, again, that proverbial hat that you're wearing. This isn't
Uh,
just a family chat. No, we're in a business meeting, and using those tools and those practices about having a curious mindset and repeating what you've heard for understanding, and all the other points you made there. I think that helps. If you can, it will help you feel like you're wearing your manager's or owner's hat. Also
mhm.
thinking about, oh, I am going to wear my manager or owner's hat in this meeting would help. I think that would be a bit of a positive feedback loop there as well. Um,
Absolutely. That's a great
so
point.
yeah, thanks. How's it going with that farm? Do you have you made progress? Are they incorporating these things? How's it going?
Yeah, no, it's I mean, like I said, they're a great family. So really, really easy people to work with, which is really nice and they're really invested in their business, right? They want to improve. They're quick to identify areas that they see opportunities for themselves and
Hmm.
really are invested in doing the work to make those improvements. So that really helps things. But they are coming along. I mean, there's still work to do. They've done sort of a lot of roles and responsibilities and building that framework within the farm. There's some
Hmm.
really great exercises that we do, but people could also find the concepts anywhere and
Hmm.
apply them. So one of the big ones that we use is the RACI accountability. So it's assigning accountability basically for
Hmm.
different tasks that you might be doing in your business. So they've done the work on that already to say who's really responsible for what.
Hmm.
And that means that when we come to the table for communication, they know what hats they're wearing for the different topics.
Hmm.
So that's really great. We've also implemented some more regular communication for them, so that things are being brought up consistently. Um, Everybody knows when it's coming, all of these things that we're talking about. So, absolutely, they're making progress. I think that some of the trickier conversations are still tricky. Uh, like we said at the beginning, nobody's a master overnight. Um, and I think it's important to recognize that some people's personalities just have a hard time saying, the thing, I
Yeah.
say the thing, like the hard thing, the direct comment, whatever it might be. Um, so they are learning the principles that they need to implement so that they can feel comfortable saying the things that they need to keep their business being productive and moving towards their vision and the vision that they have for their farm.
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome. So you'd say that
yeah,
they're in that phase now where that ball is rolling. They're having,
yes.
excuse me, they're having meetings, which is helping with communication, which is then helping with the meetings, and
Mhm.
that's really good to hear. I'm sure
And
they're.
not only, like they're on their way, but I think the other thing that's worth saying is that there's things that, in the beginning when we were in the development, the building
Hmm.
stage, and there's things that we're going back and re-looking. And that's okay too. Like it's
Hmm.
okay to accept that things are in always in draft version. Nothing is set in stone. And once you kind of start living some of the structure that you've built or living those systems and processes, it's okay to say, okay, now that the reality has set in, I think we need to go back and talk about this again. And just everybody being open to that and flexible is really important. And it's something that they're learning as we kind of get to know everybody's personalities and where people want to sit in terms of leadership.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. I think that improving communication, there's no end to that. You don't get to a point where we're done improving communication. There's going to
Yes.
be new generations coming along, you might have setbacks. You can continue to acknowledge and work at that key part of farm management.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we're getting close to the end of the call.
Yeah.
I just wanted to recap what we went over today. We had how to kick off the conversation, some of those first steps, those first considerations around getting the agenda set, getting the meeting location, and then who's coming all set up. How to have productive meetings. We talked about having an annual meeting cadence, and then we talked about how to be an effective communicator when you're at the table. So anybody who's at the meeting. Is there anything that I missed there, Sarah?
I think that was a really great roundup. I want to
Pretty
kind of
quick.
throw it back to you to say though, if someone has listened to it was quick. If someone's listened to, everything that we've said and we've kind of thrown a lot of information out there today, like what are some of the really key elements that you hope people listening are going to walk away with?
Oh, okay. That acknowledging and taking those first steps towards improving communication on your farm, you're already like, I had already give you a gold star. Like, good for you.
Yeah.
Things should improve. You are doing the right thing by acknowledging it. So that's wherever you're at. If you need a lot of work, or if you're already doing quite well and you just want to put the polishing touches kind of on your communication plan and strategy, good job. I think agendas, right? We talked about the importance of agendas. That I don't think that can be
Mhm.
overstated. The importance of that. What do you think? What else would you add as a key takeaway?
Yeah, I think again, we said no one's going to be a master overnight, but you
Right.
have to start somewhere. So, yes, you've acknowledged, and I like, agendas as a tool. Agendas in itself are a communication tool, but really, you have to start having the conversations. You will get better at them over time. I
Mm-hmm.
promise. If there's hard things that need to be said, plan beforehand how you want to say it, hopefully using some of the tips and the nuance of communication that we talked about, but you have to have it. Avoiding things, it is only going to make your life more difficult. I think I hope people would listen today and walk away with a bit more confidence to have some of those more difficult conversations.
Just a quick comment on that annual meeting cadence. I know I summarized what we had talked about today, but I didn't really go into any more depth. So a quick summary on that one is that it will help with agenda building. You'll know when certain items are going to come up in the annual meeting cadence. And I think it'll help a lot of farms stay on track. So you're going to get busy during your busy seasons. People are going to take vacations at other times of the year, and then you're going to need to get the ball rolling again. Rolling again, you'll have it kind of in the calendar, or like we need to have this meeting soon. So that can be really helpful in that overall kind of bigger picture communication strategy and process. Yeah. I thought that was really good discussing. Oh, remember when
Yes.
we opened and I said, "Oh yeah, we're going to talk about communication today."
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did.
We did, yeah. So, yeah, um, yeah. I think we'll wrap up for today.
Yes. And the other thing that we'll mention, in the spirit of this being a podcast is that we do want to hear from the people that are listening. So,
Yes.
Gavin and I are really lucky we get to talk to farm families all the time, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from even more. So if, you feel compelled to reach out to us to comment on something we've said today, um, just to tell us how fantastic we are. No, I'm just kidding. But, if you feel compelled to reach out to us, we absolutely want to hear from people. So, today's topic was based off of conversations that I am currently having with farmers. But, if there's something that you kind of want to hear our take on, then absolutely send it in via whatever channel is easiest for you. So, I mean, Backswath is on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, website, you name it. We're there. We're not very hard to find. So, get in touch with us in any of those ways. And we I should say our personal pages as well. Gavin and I are both on social media, and we'll absolutely be so happy to include your question or your comment in one of our future episodes.
We'd like to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah. So um, thanks for calling, Gavin. This was a great chat about communication.
All right. We'll do it again sometime.
Absolutely. I'm going to go have more coffee.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, bye.
Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of At the Fence Line with Sarah Chambers and Gavin Bedker. If you have any questions or comments about today's episode or would like to get in touch with us, please find us on Instagram at backswath_MGMT or through our website at www.backswath.com. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast belong solely to the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views, policies, or positions of Backswath or its affiliates. Any reference to specific products, services, organizations, or individuals does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Backswath.